Craig Stewart here. People will often ask me, why should I even consider pre-planning and prepaying my funeral? It's so morbid. We're not sick or anything, and we're not even that old, they'll say. And, this is certainly a valid comment, and I understand this sentiment very clearly. I personally understand that this is a difficult subject to discuss. After all, we're talking about our own mortality or the mortality of someone we love. And that's difficult for anyone to discuss. And I'm a funeral director. It's difficult for me to discuss this. However, it's important to understand that this conversation, it's really not about death at all. What it is about, it's about protection. It's about protecting your family, just as you've done in countless other ways. This is no different. Always remember this. Someone you love will have the responsibility of taking care of this when you die. It's not about you at all. It's about them. Do you really believe that your kids or your family members will be emotionally or financially prepared to deal with this on the worst day of their life? My experience says they won't be. Oh, they'll get through it. Many people do. But if there were a way that you could ease that burden from them, wouldn't you want to learn about it? So that even when you're gone, you're still helping them and you're providing a final gift of love. I kid with people at times when I'll say this, I'm in the business of making sure that your family continues to talk to each other when you're gone. Many times families can become estranged during this process. You may know people that this has happened to. It happened in my own family when my grandfather died. My mom and her brother, my uncle Kenny, they didn't talk for 20 years due to unresolved issues related to their dad, my grandfather's death. They finally did reconcile. They said they were sorry and that they loved each other. And the unfortunate part is my Uncle Kenny was on his deathbed and he died 3 days later. Too late, folks. Look at all the time that was lost. It's very sad. There are primarily 4 reasons why people pre-plan and prepay. They're this. Number 1, for peace of mind. Number 2, to ease the burden from their family. Number 3, to make their own decisions. And number 4, to set money aside in advance. Just to share a brief story, back in 2000, I stopped by my mom's house. It was early one morning. I was on my way to work. And I knew she'd be up. She was always an early riser, and we called it coffee and conversation. I'll never forget it. And we looked forward to it. So as we're talking, she suddenly says, Craig, when we're done, I want to go plan and pay for my funeral. Well, I responded, when? Now? She said, well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I was slightly taken aback, and I proceeded to tell her, don't worry about it. I'm in the funeral business. I'm a funeral director. I'll handle it all. Well, she insisted, so we went. Just for context, so you understand, I'm an only child. My parents split when I was 6 years old. I was raised by my mom and by my grandfather, her dad, obviously. Mom and I always had an incredible bond. She was, and she always will be, my best friend. And I get a little choked up with it, but that's okay. So we went to the funeral home. Mom proceeded to plan out her funeral. She wanted a traditional service at the Lutheran church where I was raised. She wanted some old Lutheran hymns. She also wanted some Tom Jones. Anyone who knows of the Welsh singer Tom Jones. She loved him. Mix some of his songs in. She loved the song She's a Lady. So imagine, you hear the old rugged cross followed up by She's a Lady by Tom Jones. Anyway, so she wanted burial in the family plot. She wanted a small graveside service, etc. So the funeral at that time, it cost her $6,000. Like I said, the year 2000. She paid it in full. She funded it with pre-need funeral insurance. She had options to pay it over time. She preferred to just pay it and be done with it. Now, we'll fast forward 15 years to April 28th, 2015. My mom, my best friend in the world, she died, and I was devastated, still am. Everything was done just as she wished, and that funeral that had cost her $6,000 15 years prior had ballooned to $11,000. However, because of the inflation protection of the funeral insurance, it didn't cost me or her estate a dime. My mom, in her infinite wisdom, she had ensured that I, the love of her life, if you would call me occasionally, that I would not have the financial burden of this. She also made sure that this difficult day would be a little bit easier. So even though she was gone, she was still, quote, protecting me. If you look back at my bullet points that I mentioned earlier, my mom checked off each one by doing what she did. She gave herself peace of mind. She eased the burden from her family, me, essentially. She made her own decisions and she set money aside in advance. I promise you, you will not regret this important decision. And your family, who may not agree with you now, they will send you a prayer of thanks when that difficult day arrives. Please consider giving your family this last gift of love, just as my mom did for me. Thank you.